Okay, we're back. Each year, the Mario Savio Foundation grants an award to a person or persons between the age of 18 and 26. That person who has demonstrated, as the foundation puts it, a deep commitment to human rights and social justice and a proven ability to transform that commitment into effective action. Earlier this month, the 2012 award went to Howard Watts, the field director for the Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada, working out of PLAN's Las Vegas office. Howard Watts joins us today. Welcome back to the agenda. When I think of you, I have to confess, I never really thought of you as a young activist. I just thought of you as somebody who knew what they were talking about. But congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Well earned.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
This is for your work on progressive issues, so let's just jump into some progressive issues.
Let's do it.
We actually wanted to get you to talk about Ross Miller's voter ID program a while back. You were in San Francisco accepting your prestigious award.
Yes, I was.
So let's go to that now. What is your reaction just to this voter ID bill that Ross Miller has proposed?
Well, I think that as it is a solution without a problem. You know, it's a waste of time, it's a waste of money. The current system works. The Secretary has said that it works. Somebody tried to commit voter fraud and was caught this year under that system. So as a standalone measure, I just don't see what the point of it is. It's literally pandering to and reinforcing the message that something's wrong, when all research shows that, especially in Nevada, our election system is strong.
One of the reasons that Secretary of State Miller gave for wanting to do this above and beyond wanting to quell the the black helicopter folks about voter fraud in Nevada is that he thinks we need a more efficient electronic system. He would like to have the voter rolls available electronically at polling locations just to make everyone's job easier, so we're not dealing with so much paper. So if we were to water down Miller's bill and take the photo ID part of it out, would you support that?
Yeah, and I mean, here's the thing is, you know, there are ways that this could be done, but the cost is a big issue with the session coming up. The cost for the registrars to implement this, if we had photos, the time that it would take, the training that it would take, the additional staff that it would take. You know, I'm all for modernizing the system and strengthening the system, but let's address some of the real problems like provisional ballots, which are disqualifying people from voting down ballot. They only vote in federal races. Now, if the Secretary was going to address that issue and modernize the system as a whole package, that's something that I think the progressive community could get behind. But as it is, a huge investment of time and money for little impact, I just don't see the need for it.
You know, the thing that I think is probably the biggest problem with this, and you hit on it earlier, that Miller is reinforcing the message that something is wrong with the process out there, that something is wrong with the system. Now, everybody assumes that the whole reason he's doing this is so he can run an ad when he runs for Attorney General or whatever in 2014, whatever he decides to run for, and say that he was tough and trying to protect the integrity of the process. But as you point out, I think that he is reinforcing that message now, that there's something wrong with the process, that there's something fishy going on out there, and I think that's going to be reinforced yet again when he runs television ads in even a bigger way than is happening now. That seems like the bigger problem with all of this.
No,
frankly.
I think you're absolutely right. And, you know, he could have built a broad coalition of conservatives and progressives on this issue if it was going to actually address some of the problems and access barriers that our election system currently has. The other thing is it's continuing to connect the issue of a driver's license or ID to the issue of voting, and they are not one and the same. You know, Dan Burke, the Washoe County Registrar, has said as much. That's a dangerous path to connect these two items more and more. So, you know, I think that reinforcing that message is really dangerous.
Howard, you make a great point, and one I sort of made last week, which is that if, you know, Ross Miller's such an adept politician, which he'll have to be if he's going to run for either AG or governor in the future, it may have been a good idea for him to get some sign-off, if not from your group, at least from some of the Democratic lawmakers up in Carson City, many of whom said right off the bat that they didn't think this was going anywhere and they didn't necessarily support it. I want to change the subject a little bit and broaden the conversation, because many of the big, splashy, controversial stories leading up to the election were about all the differing voter ID laws in all the different states and how that was or was not interfering with people's access to voting locations, whether this was voter suppression, whether it was intentional. Things got pretty heated in some of these states involving Secretary of State, as a matter of fact, because some of them put forth legislation. Do we need federal elections law in this country in order to stop having 50 different standards, basically, for elections?
Exactly. I mean, we already have federal standards, but I think that they've got to be strengthened. The way that elections are being held right now varies so much from state to state. You look in states like Florida, where people are waiting hours upon hours to vote, versus Nevada. So let's take what works, let's set that as a new baseline for the country, and let's end this nonsense.
Nevada as a baseline for the country. You heard it from a progressive. Mark the calendar. We'll talk about some other issues, including banking industry efforts to make Nevada foreclosure law a little more banking industry friendly, when we return with Howard Watts right after this.
Welcome back. We're here with Howard Watts of the Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada. Okay, the story in the Las Vegas Sun talking about banks pressing for changes now to last year's foreclosure law. What changes do they want? Why? And is it a good idea?
Right. So AB 284 was passed last session, and the real simple way to break it down is that a bank has to have all the legal documents required to initiate foreclosure, and that everyone involved in the process has to say that they have knowledge that everything is set up and ready to go before they foreclose on somebody. If they break the law, if they sign documents without that knowledge or falsify documents, they can go to jail. That's all it does. And you know, now there's an effort by the banking industry to try and roll that back so that they don't have to know what they're doing before they foreclose on somebody.
I guess if they want to, if they're uncomfortable about explaining who owns the mortgages, they probably shouldn't have carved them up and sold them to the Wall Street wheeler dealers in the first place.
Exactly, exactly. And you know, literally the only people that this is going to stop foreclosure on are people that shouldn't be foreclosed on in the first place, because the documents are such a mess. You know, we've seen foreclosures decreased drastically after the bill was implemented in October of last year, and ever since then banks have been they've been finding their documents, getting their ducks in a row, and foreclosures are actually increasing. So the notion that this is completely, you know, ground the system to a halt is ludicrous.
Right, right.
The bank's concern, I'll be their advocate here for a second.
There you go.
Is that, you know, this law has allowed Nevadans to just sort of indefinitely stay in their houses without paying any mortgages while this very long process drags out. So, I mean, that does seem sort of valid. You can't just let people indefinitely live in a house and not pay for it. So what is the answer then?
Well, you know, I mean, one of the things that I'd say is in the last couple of years, the banks, you know, have tightened their lending and servicing standards. So it's not, to a degree, so, you know, it's not like you can just go and get a mortgage right now and then stop paying it and sit in your house forever. You know, like I said, the foreclosure process is picking back up. With the settlement, banks are reaching out more, working on short sales. So I think that that's really a myth, the idea that you can be a freeloader and just kind of ride off the system, and the damage to your credit and other things. This is not a choice that people make lightly. You know, my dad made that choice and he didn't make it lightly at all.
Well, and it's all more incentive for the banks to get their paperwork in a row if this is actually a problem. I want to switch real quickly to something, another top agenda item for the Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada going into this legislative session, and that is mining taxes. In the last session, they passed SJR 15, would take mining's hallowed, cherished, beloved spot in the Nevada Constitution out of there and have them actually be taxed like everybody else in the state, which is to say the legislature could mess with it. Yeah. Passed once, has to pass again. Mo Dennis, the incoming leader of the Senate Democrats, has become squishy on this issue and says that it's not much of a priority. Would you respond to that, please?
Sure. Well, you know, some insider lobbyists have been spreading the word around the legislature that if this measure were passed, that it would have the unintended consequence of the mining industry paying less or no taxes.
Would you like to explain why that's wrong, or would you like me to? You go ahead.
It's ridiculous. So, you know, the details of their taxation, the deductions, everything is in statute. It's in
Exactly.
Nevada law. All this does is repeal the constitutional block that allows us from making any changes to the way that they're taxed, which is something that, as you know, Hugh, has been in place since the 1800s. So that is completely false. I want everyone, you know, any legislators that are watching today to know that that is false. Anybody that's telling you that is lying.
And unfortunately for your group, you lost a strong advocate in Sheila Leslie when she was not elected to that Senate seat up in Northern
We
Nevada.
did, but you know, one final thing, that bill passed with bipartisan support in both houses. You know, we recently talked to Senator Dennis, and he echoed this concern. So I'm saying it's not a concern. Roberson, hopefully he'll get behind it too.
That's right. Does Roberson, is he a card-carrying member of Plan now that he was at that function? over the
No,
weekend?
no, we gave him a shirt, but I wouldn't say he's a card
On that happy note, humorous note, I'm afraid we have to leave it there. Howard Watts, thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks
we
for
really
having me, guys. I
appreciate
really
it.
appreciate it.
All right, coming up next, Nevada voters probably thought their phones would stop ringing after the election. So who's calling them and what do they want? Stay with us.